It was said that all the men I served with in the military had died not long after I left. Today I saw a homeless old comrade rummaging through trash behind a convenience store, and he had an incredible story to tell. I'm writing this to you guys now. If anyone is still checking these old email addresses occasionally, it's because I think we've been lied to. I hope some of you know something or know someone we can ask for more information. I'll start from the beginning. I saw Higgins behind a 7-Eleven head in a dumpster digging around. Yes, asterisk that Higgins. The quiet, sullen guy from back then. He looked miserable like most people do now, but at least he wasn't dead. He saw me and I knew he recognized me. He turned and ran, disappearing into the back alleys. I thought, I'm not stupid. I'm not going back there. I just quietly went home. But his image clung to my mind, gnawing at me. He was dirty, gaunt, starving, but he wasn't dead. I couldn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to wake my roommates. At first I was confused, then I grew suspicious, and then it turned to pure anger. How long had it been? 4 years, 5 years. They told us the entire brigade was wiped out. But Higgins wasn't. If they lied about him, there's a good chance they lied about the rest too. It felt strange to suddenly have such a clear purpose. My body was exhausted, but my mind was sharp as a tack. At dawn, I crept through the room, avoiding every creaking floorboard so as not to wake anyone. I wasn't even annoyed by the crowds outside. Some kid held out a dozen crushing fist figures he'd sculpted from various junk, and I slipped him $1. It didn't matter anymore. Something inside me had broken, and I was sick of trying to scrape by for a future that might never come. For the past few years, I'd been a bodyguard for a rich kid named Ethan. Compared to other tycoons, he wasn't the worst, but he was still a bastard. I had to go to work before I could figure anything else out, so I went. But this time, I was a different man. My face was cold as stone, but my ears were wide open. That day, he and his rich friends lay by the pool for hours. Their conversations, Chu Liao friend drama, mostly revolved around some trial of the decade I couldn't be bothered to care about. Then there were those irritating, high-pitched squeals. A quote verbatim, someone really needs to do something about it. And a crushing fist-themed party they were attending that week. I didn't think they knew anything. The days of the rich were full of boredom and nonsense. But someone somewhere had to know something. It had to be. Ethan always said that if I wanted to go back into the military, he'd help. I didn't know if he was serious, but after my shift, I brought it up. He gave a nonchalant laugh and promised to talk to some people. I didn't know if he actually would, but at least it wasn't a flat-out refusal. That night, I went back to the alleys. Higgins looked weak and hungry. He couldn't have gone far. But that didn't mean finding him would be easy. Thousands of people were crammed in the rubble from the latest earthquake, and he clearly didn't want to be found. It wasn't until almost midnight that I tracked him down, grabbed him, and practically forced him to tell me everything. He didn't want to talk, said he'd get into trouble. But I asked him, "Can your situation get any worse?" This is what he said. I remember every word. "After you left Thompson, everything went to hell. I didn't tell anyone what happened. A big part of it was because I didn't want people to know I was here. I'd rather be a homeless man in the first world than serve like a king out there in that condemned land. Understand? All right, calm down. You left, you abandoned it, I get it. Any guy would do the same. But we were still out there in the desert, the Middle East, or somewhere around there." He frowned, disbelieving. I still can't believe it's been almost 5 years. I remember that morning as if it happened just today. We woke up, did our checks, then went on patrol, and it was there. A darkness, miles wide, sitting squarely in the black sand like a massive black mountain stranded in the land. Even then, there were some confusing orders from the general. Remember, that simmering anger recently mixed with contempt, but he'd always treated us well before. We trusted him, yet this time, it didn't sit right with us at all. He ordered us to enter that godforsaken thing to capture an oil field or something. He guessed the rebels holding it had fled because of the darkness. Yeah, that much made sense. But if everyone else had run, why were we cautiously going in? Our UAV flew in and lost signal almost immediately, but then it flew out the other side. Intact, it only recorded a complete black screen. According to the tech guys, the darkness itself wasn't harmful. It just somehow limited all electromagnetic radiation within a radius of about 3 meters. He gave a hollow laugh. Back then, we were classic cowboy soldiers who's afraid of the dark. What kept us awake the first night camping next to that monstrous place was its origin, its source, or whatever was hidden inside. In the end, we managed to fool ourselves. The military macho thing, you know? The general had a plan. We'd set up a network of men and radio relay stations, each no more than 3 meters apart. It sounded feasible. It was chillingly cold in there compared to the desert heat we were used to. Turns out it's hard to warm a place that receives no sunlight, no infrared, no radiation. Only conduction and convection through the air and sand kept the temperature just enough to survive. Hearing that, a chill ran down my spine as if I were back in that ink. I was about 200 men deep when we first entered the ink, with another 3,000 men trailing behind. The lights and relay stations kept everything bright and noisy, but around each light bulb, there was still a perfectly black sphere of darkness. I couldn't see the next light bulb until I was less than 3 meters from it, so we placed them about 2.5 meters apart. Watching the spheres of safety light up one by one in the darkness as I moved through the sand made my skin crawl, and looking back was even worse. The men, the equipment behind us, would disappear into nothingness one after another. We'd take a few steps out, start setting up, then pray to God the rest of the world wouldn't vanish in the tense seconds before the radio reconnected. Have you ever heard a radio with no static at all? No background crackle you instinctively expect? There was only a hissing silence. I remember staring at the radio, feeling like I was falling into an infinite void. An absolute vacuum of sound, a bottomless, soundless echo that somehow still felt like something was listening on the other side. I swallowed hard. I remember thinking then that it was entirely possible people were dying around me, pulled into the darkness, shot by rebels who'd found their way in or worse. But I heard or saw nothing. If you were more than 3 meters from me, you ceased to exist. The only thing that reassured us were the radio roll calls, passed through countless, noisy intermediaries. He mimicked, his voice hoarse. Zoran's fine. I remember it clearly. Rotman's fine. I held up my radio, overjoyed just to know someone was still listening. Higgins is fine. We waited for 2 heartbeats. Instead of the sector officer replying, the general's deep, harsh voice echoed through the comms. Sorky's roll call. We waited 2 more beats. He frowned, reliving the moment. He said again, all mortar teams, calculate Sorky's last known position and prepare to fire at those coordinates. I froze. What? Receiving direct orders, the 2 men in my light sphere didn't hesitate. They opened a few cans, set up the mortar, and bent over the map to calculate the firing angle. A strong burst of static shot through the radio. I'm here, my God, my radio just got. Then it went silent again. I breathed a small sigh of relief at that, just like Higgins did back then. I relaxed, and the other 2 loosened up, starting to dismantle the mortar. Then he looked at me, his eyes dark. The next order sent a chill down our spines, deeper than even the ghostly cold of that place. All mortar teams. Share coordinate data from the last signal and fire directly at Sorky's current position as quickly as possible. I stared at the radio again, this time for an entirely different reason. That was clearly Sorky's voice. Who did the general think that was? If it wasn't him, what kind of creature could imitate his voice so quickly? Did the rebels have new technology, or was he being coerced? What did the general know that we didn't? That growling voice came again. Sorky's, if you're still out there, I suggest you move immediately. If anyone encounters Sorky's, remove him from the darkness as a potential enemy. Do not touch him or allow him to speak. Higgins paused for a beat, then continued. He paused just long enough for those words to sink in. Continue roll call. I remember exchanging glances with the others. Was it clever tactics or paranoia? Too soon to tell. But none of us dared to delay roll call again. He shrugged. That place was basically the most terrifying hell imaginable. I don't know how else to describe it, and it became increasingly clear we weren't allowed to tell the truth about the situation. For hours, I stuck close to each light, my squad moving forward in 3-meter increments. I kept my rifle ready, aimed at the empty void. God help any lost soldier who stumbled into our light bubble. I wouldn't have time to distinguish who I was shooting. And honestly, I wasn't calm enough to try and hold my fire anymore. It was chillingly cold, like crawling at the bottom of a black ocean, but I was drenched in sweat. Between the constant, static-filled roll calls, nervous jokes started spreading. The lieutenants didn't even stop them. My God, if you're forced to strain your brain inch by inch through an alien darkness, and you can't even let a soldier crack a few jokes, how can anyone stay sane? The tense murmurs gradually turned into conversations, then into speculation. He lowered his voice, dropping it deep. The first truly terrifying comment cut through everything. I think I heard a growl. That immediately brought all the tension back, and I raised my rifle higher. I imagined many others doing the same. Out there in the darkness was a long line of soldiers advancing across the desert, but we couldn't hear or see each other. Maybe many realized it at the same time, but Christina was the first to say it, her voice crystal clear. She swore, then told us, "Your light only extends 3 meters from the source, but if you're standing closer to the edge of the light than to the bulb itself, anything that doesn't need light to see could be standing right outside. Just one more step, and it sees you, but you don't see it." A shiver ran down my spine imagining it. A flurry of chaotic orders immediately flooded the radio, but the general's calm anger cut through it all. All frontline soldiers prepare to shine personal flashlights forward on my command. If anything is seen, fire immediately. He returned almost immediately after, making sure he was aiming in the right direction. I stood there shivering from cold and fear, feeling the distinct weight of the rifle in my hands. The guys behind me fell back, pressing closer into the light sphere, all raising their weapons. We'd felt watched for hours and had even joked about it. If there really was something lurking out there, if it had been there all along. God, I'd empty an entire magazine into it. It was probably only a few seconds, but for me, it stretched into an endless purgatory. I didn't dare turn away, didn't dare lower my hands, didn't dare wipe the sweat from my brow. What was happening out there? Had he given the order yet? Or had our radios gone dead? If the radios were dead, maybe something had happened to the guys behind us. If the chain was broken, maybe we'd never find our way out again. No one said it, but that darkness had to be supernatural, right? Which meant we were completely out of our element. We were trained to fight people, hunt terrorists, clear out insurgent nests. But this... He paused for half a beat, then whispered, "Begin." I flicked on my flashlight almost instinctively. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving that instant. I was so tense I truly thought I saw a beam of light bend and sweep through the darkness, pushing it back a few more meters from the main bubble. Only years of ingrained training stopped my finger when the trigger was halfway pulled. There was another soldier standing opposite me, face to face, rifle raised, flashlight on. Behind him was another squad huddled around a central light, their faces pale. Are we being circled? Did we accidentally lose position, or is the darkness messing with our navigation, or what? I squinted, that distance. There's no way I could see that far. How was the 3-meter limit broken? He bent down, placing his hand on the sand as if drawing in his imagination. I looked closer. The uniforms were identical, but so were the faces. It was a reflection. And as I stared, I saw the surface of that water ripple slightly, small distortions moving. It was something massive, horrifyingly huge, with a mirrored surface. The clearest sensation I got was that it was like a giant, light-reflecting serpent slithering across the sand. Everything in me screamed to pull the trigger, but a tiny part of me asked, what can my gun do against something that big? A human only needs a few bullets to fall. But this thing, if it was truly alive, it would only get enraged. I took a step back. The others hadn't seen it yet. They were only a step or two behind me. That was good because they wouldn't know to open fire, except for all the other frontline soldiers. He swallowed. God forgive me. I ran. I didn't have time to think, to plan, to yell, to call on the radio. I just ran head first. I saw the others turn and look as I dashed past, and I could only pray they understood. The light sphere behind me flickered out, and the light sphere in front burst on. The soldiers on guard there were startled when they saw me charging, but lowered their weapons when they recognized me. They also turned to look, their faces bewildered as I continued to speed past. Darkness might block radiation, but it couldn't block vibrations traveling through the sand. I felt the first tremor like an earthquake. I had only one chance to react, spurred by a sudden flash in my mind of what was happening. I instinctively jumped. He raised his left hand, describing something massive hitting me from behind, crushing my backpack tightly against my spine. I was thrown into the air, somersaulted over a slick surface, then crashed back onto the sand. All the protective light bubbles vanished, and I was left with only my tiny flashlight. I frantically swept it around me, seeing nothing but blood-stained sand and equipment debris, and my arm was definitely broken. He winced, clutching his emaciated arm, which was hastily bandaged with a dirty cloth. I abandoned my backpack and used adrenaline to get up. No radio, no light, no one else, nothing left. That was the situation I had feared most during the entire first day and night, and it had come to pass. Which way? Which way now? All I saw was absolute blackness. That darkness haunts my nightmares to this day. If it were you, which way would you choose? There was something enormous out there, serpentine or tentacled and mirrored for some devilish reason. What good is mirrored skin in absolute darkness? It made no sense at all. But all I could do was run, pick a direction, and pray. I didn't know if God could hear prayers in a place like that. Maybe prayers were also limited to a 3-meter radius. Higgins gave a strained, choked laugh. One direction was the terrifying monster that had just ripped apart the front line. Another direction was our brigade and the general who had tricked us into this nightmare. And one direction was miles of unknown darkness. I prayed for the third direction. He sighed. I dragged myself across the sand like that for hours, days. How would I know? I had some water, but I drank it all. I only stopped to try and splint my broken arm after making sure I wouldn't be immediately killed by a giant mirrored mass of flesh striking me. All I could do was keep moving. And yes, I did think the darkness might never end. All the cowboy machismo in me was extinguished by that one experience, and I would have cried if I dared to waste water. I just wanted to see someone, anyone, a human being, the sun, he snorted. But I emerged at night. At that point, I almost didn't realize I had escaped. It was still pitch dark and bitterly cold, like the desert at night. I walked until I was delirious, then woke up in the hands of rebels. They cared for me, gave me water, a place to sleep until I healed. To this day, I still don't understand it. He shrugged, but I escaped anyway. God must have heard my prayer in there. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the darkness in my dreams, not even the mirrored monster, but the sounds I heard throughout my time lost in the dark. Growls, roars, and high-pitched squeals like the piercing sound we sometimes heard like grinding truck brakes. What the hell was out there? I'll never know. They followed me the whole way, only pushed back by a few stray shots I fired. And they left me mocking gifts every few hours, mostly the limbs of my squad mates. The terrifying thing was, they knew we were together. These weren't just animals. He looked me straight in the eye. They knew and they enjoyed tormenting me. What kind of mind does something like that, Thompson? He inhaled sharply, eyes glistening. My God. I sat there, throat tight, before I could finally ask. And then what happened? I almost whispered. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Then I deserted, you fool. Why do you think I'm in this state, wandering around here? I wasn't stupid enough to go back to that icy hell to die. And that's why you're alive, I muttered, suddenly realizing. He glanced at me, chuckling. Do you really believe that cover-up story? He asked again, laughing. This time, his laugh held a hint of mad sarcasm. There's someone you should meet at Tescoy prison. Who? I snapped, grabbing his torn collar again. Christina is alive. His face fell completely. Oh no, he replied slowly, his eyes seeming to well up. I should have guessed you'd ask about that. Vasiliv killed her. That's why he was thrown into Tesk. Any remaining hope in me shattered. I tried to swallow the blinding rage rising within me. Blaku, Vasiliv, I remembered him from the battalion. I remembered him as a prankster, a clown, someone who always made people laugh. He was the youngest person I knew in the military at that time. This made no sense. Why? I met Doran a few years ago, Higgins said. He told me Blaku led a mutiny, tried to kill the two-edged sword himself. My anger subsided when I heard that. I didn't know who that nickname referred to, but I knew her. Christina had tried to do the right thing and stop him. I let go of his collar, and he sighed heavily. Yes, she was a good person, the best. He looked up at the sickly yellow sky in the dead of night, shaking his head. If Blaku had succeeded, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation now. What do you mean? He glared at me. Haven't you been following it? I shook my head. I don't watch TV, it's all propaganda and trash. It's the trial of the decade, he replied, still looking at me as if he couldn't believe I was so out of touch. He looked up behind me, where a giant advertising screen, one of the few things to survive the latest earthquake, stood amidst the ruins of the poor district. It's playing everywhere, he whispered. General Shaw, we secretly called him the two-edged sword because of his increasingly brutal tactics. In the end, he went too far. He was the one who started everything. He was the one who brought crushing fist down on us. A nerve in me seemed to short-circuit. Hot and cold flashes intertwined as I sat there listening. Trial? General Shaw being tried for somehow causing crushing fist to descend upon us? Every news channel, in fact, every channel and every bit of gossip I overheard. Children making figures of the coming storm. TV dramas using the apocalypse as a plot twist. Sci-fi novels racing to find every explanation, every scenario where the protagonist somehow triumphs. The rich threw parties, mocking fear with themed imitations. And I was almost there from the very beginning of it all, if I hadn't left. But how could I have stayed after what happened? I had nothing left to say to Higgins. Instead, I pressed a $5 bill into his hand, all I dared to take out, and apologized for my roughness. I left the back alleys, and he walked slowly in the opposite direction, almost immediately disappearing into the dirty, sickly crowd. I remember looking back as he passed a pile of rubble and thinking I'd never see him again. But in my mind, I silently wished him luck. We had been comrades. My time in the military felt like another lifetime now, long past. But I couldn't blame him for trying to survive, even if it meant I only now learned the truth. Doran, Blocku, and Higgins were all alive, even though we were told they were dead. What the hell happened? Our brigade commander was on trial for being the source of all this, and at the same time, there was a cover-up claiming everyone we knew had died out there in the sand. That's why I'm sending this email to you guys. I need to know what happened to Christina and the rest of the people we once knew. I couldn't investigate further on my own because Ethan had already acted. When I got home, a letter was waiting for me. I had been re-enlisted, and tomorrow I would be sent to the front lines. Everything happened surprisingly fast, but perhaps this was an opportunity to go back there and ask a few more questions. And I needed someone to do something for me at Tescoy. I had no intention of going there myself to ask Vasiliv anything. I needed to know what happened, but if I saw that bastard's face, I knew I wouldn't be able to control myself. I'd strangle him to death with my own hands. Part 2. I don't think any of you are still reading these emails, but I guess if any of us survive this, every detail will be important for posterity. And maybe this is just me talking to myself, more than writing to you guys as I try to piece it all together. Plus, I couldn't sleep. Filthy children playing soccer in the street had to stop their game to make way for a shiny red object rushing towards them. As I tried to weave through the people sprawled out, sleeping fitfully, a Lamborghini pulled directly up to the cracked steps of my house. A sharp-featured face, around 25, appeared as the driver leaned over, looking out the passenger window. Ethan grinned. "You planning to walk to your redeployment, buddy? Get in, buddy." We sometimes joked around, but I'd never called him a friend. Still, he'd been my boss for years, and I didn't want to burn that bridge myself. I stepped forward, he popped the trunk, and I tossed my large duffel bag into the front trunk, then slammed it shut without much care. I climbed in, pulled the door down. He glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "Not a car guy?" I shook my head slightly. He shrugged, then slowly started crawling the car forward inch by inch through the jammed street. It had been years since I'd ridden in a car here, and I had a strong feeling I'd just been thrown back to Cairo, Sudan, or one of the other places I'd been deployed to. That feeling mixed with irritation as we left the slums and merged onto a wide, smooth highway, almost devoid of cars. Ethan pressed a button, the car's roof automatically folded back. And so we were cruising on a windy path under a brilliant yellow sky. The highway was cleverly built to conceal the entire slum below, only showcasing the giant, gleaming skyscrapers rising above, both in the city center and along the suburbs. From where we sat, the city looked like a valley rimmed by a giant circle of towering monolithic blocks, with a palace-like structure in the middle. "I never properly thanked you for how you handled things with my mother," Ethan said loudly, putting on sunglasses, his eyes still on the road. Out of habit, I avoided looking directly at him, only glancing out. "Just doing my job. I'm not your boss anymore," he replied, glancing at me. "You don't have to be so humble. Do you want $1 million? That made me turn and look at him squarely. "What?" A wave of disgust surged as I thought about what money turned people into. I had stood by and watched too many scenes I only wanted to forget, just to protect those who should have been brought to justice. "No, that's what I like about you." He smiled, lightly punching my shoulder. "Everyone here is obsessed with money, either having a lot or trying to get it, but you stand outside it. Why?" I just kept my eyes on the white lines stretching across the road. "You've seen a lot out there, haven't you?" he asked. I didn't answer. He shrugged and let it go. "Anyway, this whole thing is a dirty game, right?" I spun my head to stare at him. I had suspected the speed of his response after I asked the question, and my sudden redeployment was a retaliatory move to get rid of me. I just didn't think he knew or cared. "I'm not blind," he said. "I just accidentally brought up your concerns because I suddenly remembered. Plus, I was drunk then, and the way those bigwigs reacted was like I'd just shot their dog. Then the next day, you were redeployed." Well, I didn't know what to say or how to react. Luckily, we had started to pull off onto an exit ramp. On foot, this stretch would take quite a while. But we reached the military compound, right on the edge of the suburban skyscrapers, in just a few minutes. Ethan just waved his hand, and the surprised guard at the gate opened the barrier for us. Then he parked wherever he pleased. Crossing the vast, eerily empty parking lot, I walked towards the main building, memories of this place flooding back. It used to be much livelier. Now, only a few scattered figures moved about, none with the urgency or haste I remembered. Inside, a guard was sprawled on a chair at the small security desk, a book in his hand, a pile of lanyards in a box at his feet. Seeing no reaction from him, I hesitated, reaching for one. "Don't bother," Ethan said, pulling me along. "Who cares?" Maybe the guard doesn't either. He just looked up, gave us a quick glance as we walked brazenly past, no cards, no scans. "Do you know where you're going?" I asked. Ethan laughed, unconsciously smoothing his suit. "No, do you?" "Yeah, I guess this way." I led the way into a maze of hallways, wondering why the place was so understaffed and poorly maintained. When I first joined, this place was a hub of activity, but that was many years ago. Maybe they'd moved everything elsewhere. There it is, the elevator going down. I have my orders, and I know where I need to be. We crossed a wide staging area, heading straight for two massive metal doors that slid open slowly when I pulled the handle. The giant gridded floor elevator swallowed us without a sound. I pressed the button for the lowest level. "Are you just finding your way down here?" Ethan asked. I didn't have an answer for him or for myself. I guess so. After a few minutes passed as the elevator descended, someone finally came to meet us. An old man with white hair in a military uniform stood outside as the doors slid open. "Thompson?" I stood at attention. The old guard glanced at Ethan, briefly taking in his shiny suit, healthy face, and relaxed posture, then decided not to ask him anything. "This way." Following the wide concrete corridors, past piles of crates, equipment, and supplies, we reached the massive underground dome I remembered so clearly. It was still illuminated by white and purple light, but this place, too, was much emptier than before. A few beefy soldiers sat idly by the giant logistics door, a few technicians at the control station. The burly soldiers began to circle the edge of the dome, moving towards us. The silver-haired guard began to recite a weary list of standardized questions. "Are you carrying any large metal objects on your person?" "No," I replied, my eyes still fixed on the immense space. Metal platforms descended in sequence, forming what looked like a giant, mile-wide mechanical vortex. Each platform drifted, spinning at a different speed. At the center was a circular pool. My body's memory resurfaced, and just looking at it was enough to make me nauseous. "Are you carrying any weapons?" I shook my head. "No." The burly soldiers finally reached us. One rummaged through my duffel bag, another patted me down. "Any recent head trauma?" "No." "Life-threatening illness?" Never mind, you're well, right?" My hand still raised during the search, I glanced over, trying not to be sarcastic. "Well, this is your official order." He handed me a small piece of paper, then ran a hand through his short, gray hair, frowning. "So, we're only sending you one step, but there's no one on the other side to help you set up a return trip. There might be some engineers operating the farm systems, but I myself don't understand how you plan to come back. We don't send people out there anymore." My God, you must have really pissed off someone important. I had guessed this was a dirty trick, but to this extent? My jaw tightened, and I suddenly understood why so many burly soldiers were surrounding me. I also wondered what that said about the military if no one was maintaining the parallel facility on the other side anymore. So I'd have to find one of the other facilities when it was time to come back. Or was he subtly implying that everything had been abandoned? After inspecting my belongings and me, the soldiers backed off but remained very close. Ethan, patting one of the soldiers on the shoulder like an older brother, walked through their circle and approached me. "Well, I guess this is where we part ways." He reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a small case, and took out a cigar. He twisted off the end, tucked it into the front pocket of my uniform, then patted it. "One last cigar for the best bodyguard in the city, though you really should quit." "That stuff kills." I remained silent, just nodding slightly. I didn't smoke, and he knew it. He'd offered me one countless times, along with his rich friends. It had become our private joke. Wait, were we really friends? Now I'd never know. The soldiers escorted me away, quickly leading me around the edge of the massive machine. They stayed close as I walked across the gangway, then made sure to strap me tightly into the acceleration chair at the central platform. And just like that, in an instant, I was preparing for a journey I thought I'd never have to take again. I didn't think about what I was leaving behind. There was nothing left for me here. This lauded, first world, was filled with toil, humiliation, and pain for anyone who wasn't rich. Even so, life here in poverty was still better than the lives of anyone out there. At least, that's what they drilled into us. So I understood very clearly that what I was about to do was foolish. I was staking the biggest changes of my life on the need to unearth the truth about what happened 5 years ago. I knew I was an idiot for going back into danger, but what else was there? Was this quest just an excuse because I had reached my limit with life here? Or was seeking the truth, in some vague way, how I made myself feel that Christina wasn't truly dead? As long as the mystery remained, her story lived on and continued to evolve. The mechanical vortex below began to rumble, and its rotating motions slowly brought a rising nausea to my stomach. God, this part is always the worst. I forced my eyes open, looking through the intense purple flashes and continuous white light until the energy tunnel roared around the descending platform and swallowed everything. The moment arrived startlingly fast. The seat belt snapped open, left behind in a way both geometric and inexplicable, and I staggered to my feet. I stumbled forward, pulled sideways by the surge of energy rushing behind me. Then I managed to regain my balance as it receded and vanished. The purple light faded, and I found myself standing amidst a cluster of tall trees. Their trunks still swayed and bent from the sudden gust of wind. I braced myself, first against the lingering nausea. Then, against the reality of my hand touching a tree trunk, the cool, rough bark alive beneath my fingertips. Looking up, I realized I was almost entirely surrounded by trees, and it suddenly hit me how terribly I had missed them after all those years in the city slums and under its sky. Above the vibrant green canopy, a dazzling blue sky shimmered, moving with the wind. Laughing like a madman, I grabbed my duffel bag and stumbled through the tall grass, heading towards the bright screen I sensed ahead. The trees gradually gave way to endless fields of wheat, shimmering amber under the sun. This was an agricultural fortress, one of many surrounding the First World and one of the safest places. Until now, before the influence of crushing fist. I couldn't see much through the tall wheat stalks, but my blood was surging with a vitality I hadn't felt in years. What did my orders say? I lightly tossed my duffel bag onto my back, pulled out my hand, and used both hands to open the paper. Yeah, it was blank. Just as Ethan said, this was a dirty trick, but did I really have a choice? Just getting involved in a lawsuit would be enough to cost me everything I had, eventually leading to a conviction and decades in prison. At least this way, the prison walls were inverted. I couldn't go home, but I could go anywhere else. I dropped the blank paper into the wheat and dirt. Following a curious hunch, I reached into my pocket and pulled out Ethan's cigar. Running my fingers along it, I felt for an abnormality. There. Breaking the cigar in half, I pulled out a small metal chip. It had a series of intricate etchings, but I couldn't understand them. Given his social standing, to play such games. He had intentionally put this in my hand after the soldiers thoroughly searched everything I had. If he went to that much trouble, it was highly likely I'd need it. I carefully concealed it. Pushing my way through the field, I continued forward cheerfully. A loud screech echoed from somewhere distant like tearing metal, but I ignored it. Even that phenomenon wasn't as bothersome out here, amidst the grass and life. I stopped when I reached the road and was immediately stunned. Thousands of people were walking at a slow pace, carrying children, belongings, and food. There shouldn't have been anyone here. Just a few technicians operating the global agricultural system to avoid detection. I immediately merged into the flow of people, silently walking along the road. "Are you a soldier, mister?" a little boy asked, holding his mother's hand, blonde hair beneath a tied scarf. The mother's face was weary. She hitched her backpack higher on her shoulder and looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Used to be," I replied, looking down at the boy. His mother moved closer. "I'm sorry to be so blunt, but would you mind walking with my son and me for a while? He's been scared since we left home. His father's a soldier, so having you here might make him feel better." Would that be all right? I looked ahead over the crowd but couldn't see our destination. I wasn't sure what to ask about it without drawing attention. "Has your journey been difficult?" She nodded slowly, wiping sweat from her brow. 10 years ago, she must have been beautiful. Now, more than anything, she was utterly exhausted. I wondered what had happened to all these people. "Yes," she said. "When you're walking long distances, you have plenty of time. I'll tell you my story if you tell me yours." The boy held out his other hand, and I took it. The gesture touched something within me, bringing tears to my eyes. It had been a very long time since I'd held a child's hand like a father, like a completely different life. "All right," she sighed and began her story. "Have you ever been in love, mister?" "I can tell you have. We were in love. His father was abroad when that terrible sound started. At first, it only appeared every few days. I heard it once at the dog park, then again at the supermarket. I knew it was real when friends started mentioning it at book club meetings, and we realized no one on TV was talking about it. The usual talking heads still discussed beauty care, politics, new books. That was perhaps the most frightening part. A sudden disconnect between what we thought TV was and what it truly was. I stopped letting my son watch as soon as I realized there were people out there who decided what we saw, heard, and spoke, and they didn't want us talking about the sound. The police started becoming terrifying, horrific, dressed in full military gear. Not to protect us from some invisible threat, but to keep us compliant when the earthquakes began. Everyone knew something terrible was brewing, but no one had a clue what to do about it. And on TV, everything was still chirping along as if nothing was wrong. Then I received a video from my husband. "No, I'm okay, just thinking about it chokes me up." I received a video from my husband, and he was basically saying goodbye. He was on the east coast of Africa, and that place was burning. Blue fire freezing everything it touched. Yes, sounds illogical, right? But he filmed it for me, and he told me to take my son, gather whatever I could carry, and run. My neighborhood hadn't been directly hit by an earthquake, but it had been emptying out for weeks. People disappeared one by one, and after that video, I went door to door. I knocked on almost every house in the neighborhood with no answer. I started to worry I was the only one left in the world. Where had everyone gone? But I managed to catch Mary Jo just as she was about to leave with her 2 daughters. She looked terrified, but she was trying to be calm for her children. I didn't truly believe what she told me, but what choice did I have? She told me I had 2 minutes. So I rushed home, grabbed KP, and snatched whatever I could carry. Police tanks were rumbling through then, trying to block people from leaving the city. But they just barely missed my son and me. Mary Jo said she wouldn't go without me, but before that, she thought she was the last one left. That made me a little sick to my stomach, wondering if we had left someone behind due to the same mistake. But I guess I'll never know. Just as she said, it was there a crack in the world. Rumors had spread through the grapevine to almost everyone. Person to person, family to family, friend to friend, we had to leave our cars a ways back and walk. It felt like going to a festival, and I told KP we were going to a festival. People were streaming onto the sidewalks like a crowd going to a fair. But in everyone's eyes, there was tension, looking around constantly, afraid of the police and the rich who had turned into warlords commanding them. We heard them appear about half a mile behind us, but by then it was too late. The crack looked terrifying, distorted, blurry, with random flashes of light, but going through it was like turning into an alley. We walked on a grassy path between 2 suburban houses and emerged into another backyard. The trees were slightly different colors, the clouds in the sky were a different shade of gray, but otherwise, it was identical to the neighborhood we had left behind. The stream of people kept moving in a specific direction, and we just followed along, not knowing what else to do. Mary Jo walked close by, and we whispered whenever the kids were distracted by something else. The rest of the people didn't know anything more than that they were also just following the person in front, who was doing the exact same thing, and we soon learned the reason there was another crack. This one was hidden in a cluster of trees near where our house used to stand. In our world, or our reality, or whatever it was the place we had fled from, I begged Mary Jo to wait, and she begged me not to go, but I had to. I led KP running towards our house. It was exactly as I had hoped. Henry was sitting on the steps, his face buried in his hands. I remember my heart stopping when I saw him. He looked up, then jumped up, knocking over his chair. He ran to hug me, crying and asking, "How could this be?" I just shook my head, and he explained, "I just watched the video you sent from Brazil, where I'm serving in the military and where people are trapped in a desperate battle with a terrible swarm of insects, multiplying as fast as locusts covering an entire continent." He wasn't my husband, and I wasn't his wife. I understood exactly what we had done by crossing the crack, and even as we stood there, the ground still trembled. He tried to hold me tight, but I pulled away. This place wasn't safe either, and it wasn't my home. I just shook my head, pulled KP from his hand, and ran. Mary Jo was waiting for us, each hand clutching a daughter. She didn't ask what I had seen, she guessed. Then we, along with the stream of people, moved on to the next place where organized men with vehicles were waiting. But they weren't like the armed police we had just escaped. They were just ordinary men driving pickup trucks. God bless those people. They handed out food, constantly gave directions, keeping people moving along the right path. The rumor in the crowd was that someone had passed through here and warned them beforehand. Their world was now empty because they had evacuated everyone, leaving behind only a backbone of volunteers. That's where we were headed. You see, the people who passed through and warned them had gone ahead of everyone else, and the rumor was they had established safe points further ahead. But from then on, nothing was easy. The roads were cracked, and no one could truly take command because no one knew what they were facing. All we could do was stick close together, share any information we had, and try to find our way. The cracks weren't always short, walk through and you're done type things. Some cracks stretched terrifyingly, as if two realities had been pulled far apart. And that space in between was, sorry, it's hard to remember this part. If you looked up into that screaming void, you'd go mad instantly. That's all anyone knew. You weren't supposed to look up, which was very hard because all your senses were tortured by screaming sounds, whistling winds, strange smells. I had to cover KP's eyes and try to make it a game, but I think he knew something was very wrong. All I could do was look down at my feet and push forward, so the ground looked like a parking lot. Strange, right? Just flat gray rock stretching on forever. Mary Jo said to her, it looked like an endless lawn. I guess it wasn't real ground in the way we understood it. I don't know how long it took to get to the other side. 20 minutes, 30. Honestly, it felt like forever. I thought my heart would explode from anxiety. Nevertheless, we made it through and rested at a makeshift infirmary, where people were caring for the unlucky ones who had glanced into the screaming void between realities. Then, a rumor spread from the world of the kind men driving pickup trucks. People said that someone or something was hunting us, or at least trying to track where we were going, and they were ordered not to tell anyone who came after us where we had gone. That news still keeps me awake at night. Who would be chasing us? Was it the rich using the crisis to consolidate power? Wishing them well wouldn't help because we were just leaving their global empire behind and walking through other realities. Or was it something worse? I kept thinking about those two unnatural things, the blue ice fire and the invasion of impossible insects. What the hell was really happening? Then it occurred to me, if we were moving between realities, were other things stepping into ours? Think about it, anything could be out there. I'm not really into science fiction, but my husband used to make me watch a few movies, and thinking about those grotesque rubber-headed monsters from the movies, or worse, that they could be real. Every time that thought flashed, a shiver ran down my spine. Then we stumbled upon a terrible place. It looked like a battlefield from a movie. Houses crushed, fires flickering, dead bodies. I had to cover KP's eyes again, making up another game so he wouldn't suspect. People were everywhere, all ordinary men, not soldiers, shooting at something nearby and firing mortars at something on the horizon. And then, my God, it was unimaginable. All I saw was a mechanical leg the size of a mountain. It moved, and clouds swirled around it. What the hell was it? Every time it shifted slightly, the whole area shook violently. Earthquakes even stronger than anything we had experienced. And on the city's burning streets, warped, bloodied bodies rushed at us like crazed beasts. The weirdest part was that when they were between two fires, not directly illuminated, they disappeared. They would reappear somewhere else, about 15 meters closer, right in front of someone. Then came more screams, gunshots, the clang of knives. But many guerrilla fighters rushed in, pushing us forward, while simultaneously forcing the rest of the line back towards the crack. I still remember that scream clearly. You have to find another way, it's not safe here. I remember it so clearly because Mary Jo and her 2 daughters were among the group being pushed back. I started to run towards her, but the men pushed us forward, pointing their guns and forcing us to keep moving. No time left, one man said calmly, his eyes cold as steel. You have to go. And it was Henry again. Before I could understand what was happening, he had pushed Mary Jo and KP and the end of the line through to the next place. From then on, things quieted down a bit. It seemed we had escaped the direct war zones. Now it was just walking, crying, exhausted, then walking again. The cracks started getting further apart with each new world we crossed into. Some saw it as a good sign, but to me, it just meant we were walking from Topeka to Dallas, then up to Oklahoma City, and then west to Phoenix. When we reached the arid, desert regions, we started losing people. First, it was the elderly and the sick. We couldn't accurately calculate their water needs, and then water started running out. Sometimes locals helped, but mostly we encountered closed doors and scowling faces. I couldn't blame them. They didn't have enough to save such a stream of people. How many had they seen pass through? Thousands, even more. Sometimes I would stack stones as markers for Mary Jo. But we were at the tail end of the line, and I didn't know if she was following this path or if she even understood the meaning of the piles of stones. We also saw fewer people. Besides a few stubborn landowners still clinging on, glaring at us, the roads were empty, the cities silent. Everyone had gone ahead. Of course, we thought about looting in the cities we passed through. We had to. But the thing was, someone had left behind barrels of water and stacks of canned goods. They were everywhere, one by one, human to human, they had left what they could. It gave us a little more faith and kindness, and that's exactly what we needed to claw our way back from utter exhaustion. We didn't know who had placed the things we ate and drank each night, but we were grateful. I tried to sneak into a few nearby houses to see if there were any names, but there was no time to linger. Our column of people gradually became a loose knot, mostly made up of those who started from the same place. Somehow, at some point, we had lost the group ahead and perhaps taken a different path, following paper markers left as guides. Sometimes, utterly spent, we'd stop and camp for a day or two just to enjoy a new sky, a new place, but always, somewhere in the distance, there were piercing screams, tremors. They lessened as we went deeper, but they were always there. I started to think this would never end. Seriously. The days blurred together, we had no way of knowing what day it was. Newspapers had stopped printing at some point, so everything we picked up was old. Just when I thought about leaving the group to build a new home somewhere, it appeared. We were walking through an empty Lowe's Angels when we turned a corner and encountered an endless, silent parade of exhausted people. It was the column, and we rejoined it. KP thought we had won the game, and in a way, we had. I was so tired I couldn't remember exactly what I said to him, but he got an ice cream as a reward. I broke down the door of a dusty shop and found some ice cream. It was freezer burned after all that time in the freezer, but someone was still maintaining the electricity and the freezer was running, and it was the best ice cream of my life. "Oh, Mom is saying naughty words," KP interrupted. "Haha, sorry," she laughed. I looked down at his face where there were still a few chocolate streaks. "Did that just happen today?" "Just this morning," she replied, her mouth smiling but her eyes distant. I should have taken more. But bringing it out here, in this beautiful field, it just melted away. As we walked, a rusty pickup truck drove alongside the column, then stopped a little ahead. An old man with a long white beard, his hair streaked with white, hoisted a crate from a pile of crates in the truck bed, raising it. "Food! Anyone need food?" The crowd surged forward, but lines quickly formed. I was quite impressed. For a moment, I had feared chaos. These people had all been thrown into a common situation and forced to cooperate to survive. Looting wouldn't help anyone. KP still clutched my hand, and I found myself being pulled into line. As another man jumped down from the truck and started distributing food, the old man looked at me intently from above. He spoke with a Southern American accent from Alabama or one of the Carolinas. Like these people, he had traveled a long way. "Military uniform, son?" Cautiously, I gave the most neutral answer I could without being disrespectful. "Yes, sir, military." "Do you have training?" "Yes, sir." "Do you want to meet my superiors? We could use your skills." I didn't want to draw attention, but at the same time, the terrifying scale of the situation didn't escape me. While in the first world, I had never heard a word about this massive, inward migration, and I had my own questions. "All right, then I'll give you a ride." I nodded, took his hand, and climbed into the truck bed. "Could you also give my friend and her son a ride?" "Sure, where are they?" I turned around, sweeping my eyes across the sea of hungry faces. I didn't see her nearby. I started looking for blonde hair until I remembered she was wearing a scarf. The sea of people stretched to the horizon and she was moving somewhere within the crowd. I had only looked away for a second. My heart clenched with a cold pain. "She's gone. I didn't see her." The old man knelt at the edge of the truck bed. "What's her name?" I opened my mouth but choked. I didn't ask her name." "Well, that makes it hard, but we have to keep going to find more food," he sighed. "Just keep looking around, okay? Maybe you'll find her." Nausea surged, and I slumped down, my eyes fixed on the moving stream of people as the truck engine started and it rolled forward. In a flash, she was gone, but she'll be okay, as long as she's with this crowd. I kept repeating that to myself as the truck sped up and all hope of finding her and KP faded to nothing. The wheat fields undulated like an amber sea, the sun slowly beginning to set. I still stared intently at the moving column of people, though there was no longer any reason to, my eyes seeing but not perceiving. Finally, the field ended abruptly. The truck drove onto a flat, barren land, the familiar preparation area for agricultural machinery systems. But now, the empty expanses originally meant for machines were packed with people. Men set up tents, women washed clothes in basins of water, children played, the elderly knitted or cooked. Just as KP's mother had said, it was like a festival, but massive and never-ending. This festival wouldn't end when night fell and no one would go home. "We've got a new one here," the driver called out as we stopped in front of a technical building, about the size of a suburban house. It was built of low stone to withstand the weather. Now, it seemed to be serving as a headquarters. A few burly men emerged, one of whom had a face identical to the guy who had strapped me into the chair that morning. I tried to suppress a laugh. They say doppelgangers in other realities are disturbingly similar, but at this moment, I needed a bit of humor to chase away the cold in my heart, so I just gave a weak smile. "What are you laughing at?" he asked, but I just shook my head, letting my expression return to normal. Instead of leading me inside, they waited, asked me a few questions, then relayed the answers via handheld radio. After a few minutes, the person on the other end appeared. I frowned. It was a kid, a boy in his late teens, barely an adult, probably not even old enough to enlist. In his hand was a strange book. "Hold this man tightly," the boy ordered. Immediately, strong hands clamped onto my arms like vices. I didn't resist, choosing to wait and see what was happening. He opened the book, flipping through it, reading very quickly yet intently. I didn't know what he was doing, maybe checking a processing procedure or trying to identify my uniform. As I waited, I looked to the side, and my blood ran cold. Among the men inside a large command tent set up next to the technical building, there was another figure, distinctly different. His skin was pale yellow, his facial features sharp and angular. Had things really gotten so bad that an intact was here? He looked at me, saw my uniform, and his long, lashless eyes narrowed. That was enough. It was time to resist. Just as I tensed, ready for a struggle, the boy with the book suddenly exclaimed, "Holy shit, do you guys know who this man is?" He pulled out his radio. "My brothers, we need to talk." What had he read in that book? The hands gripping me loosened, and I followed the guards inside the technical building, behind the boy, the one who had somehow exonerated me. Inside, it was darker. My eyes took a moment to adjust, but the first thing I saw was a large screen mounted on the wall. On it, a giant sphere made up of countless smaller spheres slowly rotated. "What is that?" I asked, my heart pounding. The boy looked up at the screen, his face grave. "That's us. That's all the realities within the shield." I gasped, my head spinning. I had never seen anyone depict it this way. He nodded. They let me step closer to get a good look. A single sphere in the very center was still unmapped, the first world. Small dots marked our position just outside it, and a few blue spheres represented relatively safer realities deeper within the agricultural worlds and a few other scattered places. Several spheres in key positions were colored yellow. I decided to ask about them first before getting to the worst question. "What are these spheres?" He tilted his head. "Unclear. We call them red points. We get information from there, but we can't communicate directly. It seems those places are safe and completely unaware of what's happening." That surprised me. Even in the first world, I hadn't heard anyone mention that. I braced myself for the worst question. "What about these spheres, these red ones?" I asked, pointing at the enormous number of red spheres crawling along 5 main lines throughout the structure. It wasn't exactly a fist, but I understood why people called it that. It looked like a small globe being squeezed in a giant, angry hand. "Those are the squealing sounds," he replied, his face gray. "The sound of reality being compressed. Those are the earthquakes, the planet readjusting itself." He swallowed before choosing his next words, the answer I already knew just by looking. "Little by little, we are literally being crushed." I could only stand there and watch. This was the naked, terrifying truth. First world media described it as an apocalypse, but they always said the inner golden shield would protect the heart of humanity. But even if that were true, how many people just outside that wall would be sacrificed for the survival and comfort of the wealthy elite? I realized my hands had clenched before the anger could truly form and turn into thought. "Are you going to help us?" he asked. I glared at the screen, imagining those bastards in their swim trunks, smoking cigars by the pool right now, while millions of people suffered beyond that spatial wall. What could the plan be? Well, you just came from there, he said, pointing to the dark sphere in the middle. Do you want to help us break open a return gate? I haven't even been out of the deployment facility for 24 hours. No way, hold on. He shrugged. And more than that, we need to break into a prison. That immediately grabbed my attention. Which prison? You guys only have one detention center, right? A pocket reality no one has ever escaped from. He looked down at a laptop on a nearby table. Tescoy. It sounds scary, it really does, but we really need help. Cold anger. That was the only thing I felt then. Everything was too big. I couldn't make all the liars pay. I couldn't get revenge for being pushed out or for how they abandoned humanity out here. But there was one person I could personally bring justice to. The important thing was they couldn't know why I was helping. They wouldn't understand. All right, I'm in. Part 3. After today, I almost felt like I was back in the military. That feeling of completing a mission, a perfect operation. This was once what I lived for. 57, 58, 59, 60. I slowed down as I hit the 30-minute mark of my morning run around the nearby drainage lake. The gentle slope surrounding the mile-wide water body was the only place I could find empty, not completely covered by refugee tents. Their numbers only increased by the hour, and the entire agricultural field often looked like an ocean of people. The young man I met yesterday afternoon, now I knew his name was Danny, ran up from behind. A group of about 80 men, women, and children of all ages followed him in a fairly orderly formation. And what do you do if you see a blurry figure, eyes glowing, one purple, one blue? Danny called out, face forward, eyes fixed on the empty slope ahead. Don't listen when it calls. The group chanted in unison. They mimic human voices. He called out something else, but the group had already run past. I slowed down, then stopped completely, watching them run a lap around the giant drainage lake. How did a kid that young become a commander, and where did he learn these paramilitary training tricks? Standing there catching my breath, I saw a smaller boy sitting by the water's edge. He was skinny, wearing glasses, huddled with his knees drawn up. I had seen him at the technical building, so I knew he belonged to the core group of kids and teenagers who had somehow become part of our command structure. But he hardly said a word. Not training with the others? I asked, sitting cross-legged a few feet to his left. He looked at me, pushed his glasses up, then glanced back at the running group. Sometimes I do, sir. I'm still not used to this body. I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, this age is weird. Everything's constantly changing. For 2 years during puberty, I was clumsy as hell. He turned to look at me, surprised. God, but you look cool, sir. Nah, I chuckled, feeling a little awkward. The military just molds you. I held out my hand. I'm Thompson. I'm Thomas, he replied, shaking my hand with growing confidence as he realized I was genuinely treating him with respect. I deliberately turned my gaze to the water's surface, where the sun broke into shimmering, ethereal blue ripples. I can't tell you how relieved I am to see a blue sky again. We're a long way from home now, aren't we? Thomas nodded. I guessed he wasn't much for talking. All right then. I picked up a small stone and threw it just right. It skipped 8 times on the water before sinking. Whoa, how'd you do that, sir? He perked up a bit. My dad taught me. I handed him a rock. This one's good. You gotta choose a flat one and hold it just right. He tried the underhand toss I demonstrated, and the stone actually skipped 2 or 3 times. That's weird. I guess the surface tension of the water is pushing the stone. I shook my head. That sounds logical, but actually the stone is flying like a wing. It's not flying in the air, but in the denser layer of water, just enough for it to bounce back. That's why you have to spin the stone. The rotational kinetic energy keeps it stable. No way, let me try again. He burst out laughing when his second throw, with more spin, went much further than the first. That's insane. The world is full of strange things, I said, almost repeating the exact phrase my father used to tell me. It had been a long time since I'd talked to a child like that, and it stirred up many vague pains mixed with rare happy memories within me. The small radios on our belts crackled, calling us back to headquarters. We walked towards the technical building in silence, though Thomas still held a stone, occasionally raising it to admire it with awe as we wove through the sea of tents. Inside, a large crowd was gathered around a central table. All the workstations, screens, and equipment had been pushed aside to make room for the onlookers. Among them were many who had just finished their run. Danny stepped forward, leaning over the edge of the table, wiping sweat from his brow. This is going to be tough, he said, his voice still breathless from the run. We spent all night discussing how to approach this. Based on the data Heath pulled and what Thompson told us. He glanced at me, then swept his eyes across his young comrades. It turns out Tescoy is a kind of crippled, never fully developed fragment of reality. There's a planet there, but no stars, no sun. What heats it? Someone asked softly. A tall, gangly man somehow still seemed separate from the crammed crowd, though he stood right in their midst. His eyes narrowed. Danny turned to me again. Thompson, this is Noah. He'll be going with you as planned. I remained silent, just nodding and greeting to my first new teammate. I had a lot to say, but I held it back, waiting for the commander to finish, and only when he needed to ask. The Earth there is heated by the same kind of internal pressure as ours. And because that fragment of reality is so small, the data also indicates it's further heated by tidal friction. It's located somewhere within the first world's shield, trapped between layers. It's also described as disgusting, horrible, like nightmare material, because they've had a lot of time to dump everything they didn't know where to put all the people and creatures. No light, no order. They threw you in there and forgot about you, like a pit of forgotten detention. Someone chimed in, and many nodded. I know General Shaw is currently there, awaiting trial. I wondered how they managed to bring him out for court whenever needed. But Danny had anticipated that concern. Important prisoners or those still awaiting trial are kept in a part of the upper access station, he said, pointing. It's attached to the reality wall, about 600 meters above the ground, basically suspended in a starless, moonless sky. He shook his head. We hope Christina is there. She told Heath she'd try to convince the First World to help, so it's possible there's still a channel for high-level communication there. That would give them a reason to keep her in the station instead of throwing her down completely. And if she's not there? My quiet, distant new comrade asked. Noah asterisk, I reminded myself, trying to remember another name among the dozens I'd had to learn in the past 24 hours. Then things will get ugly, Danny replied, a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead. He glanced at a clean-shaven young man, probably in his 20s, wearing a torn, old t-shirt. And the chip Alex gave us isn't just a compass and a first-world access key. It also has a faint, inherent signal that our wild card can sense. We're going to try to open a direct gate to them. Heath thinks the Tescoy prison is still accessible because it's not entirely within the inner shield layer. It drifts near the surface of the golden layer at certain times, and that will be our opportunity. He nodded slightly, looking forward. Jay and his men will go through that gate as a reserve force, ready to fight if needed. How will Thompson and Noah get to the prison? The man who had been named Noah asked. I silently repeated the name in my head. Noah Fur, they'll take our intact ally as a prisoner, Danny explained, smiling slightly. The oldest trick in the book, Thompson. Do you think it'll work? Suddenly the center of attention, I stood a little straighter. Yes. The intact and the First World have a bloody history of animosity. They won't even bother to ask. In case they do, I've modified your personnel file on a highly insecure subnet server. A warm male voice came from a computer speaker. Congratulations on your promotion. You're now a special agent deployed with the mission to capture an enemy spy. I tilted my head, puzzled. That's Heath, Danny said, his confidence masking a churning mix of contradictions. He's supporting us from another location. I nodded, noticing the strange glances on the faces of those in the command circle. I didn't ask. So, Danny continued, you'll take the prisoner to a vortex gate station we've found, and then you'll escort him to Tesk. Noah will go with you, wearing the fanciest suit we could find. From what you told us, as long as he acts influential and powerful enough, they won't question his presence there. If they do, he'll have an ID card with your old boss's name, Ethan. I nodded again. Noah is important because the data Heath sent indicates a special locking mechanism inside the prison station. They created something that can't be cracked, can't be broken, can't be stolen. He's probably your best chance to get through in case you can't talk your way deep enough. He sighed. All of this is crucial because of the food situation. The agricultural worlds can produce massive amounts of food, but we have 600 billion people across 14 realities, and more are coming in every day, so if we don't resolve this situation within 2 months. I raised my hand, interrupting the commander for the first time in my career, not because I wanted to interrupt, but because I believed the young lieutenant needed this lesson. With all due respect, sir, I'm just a soldier. I take orders. You've told me what to do, that's enough. I don't need to know who we're saving, why, or the big picture. Those things just distract me. He swallowed half a sentence he was about to say, then nodded, understanding both my words and the message beneath them. A rumbling roar vibrated through the ground floor. Dust fell from the ceiling as the earth shook beneath our feet. We can't waste any more time. Let's begin. And so we set off. Larry narrowed his lashless eyes, his sallow face contorting into an expression of thinly veiled suspicion and disgust. I called him Larry because his real intact name was practically unpronounceable. I knew I needed to bridge the gap between us if the team was to work smoothly. But Danny spoke first. "Is there a problem, sir?" Swaying with the jostling of the truck, his hand unconsciously gripped the edge of the metal bed where we sat. Larry lifted his head. "That uniform. In our eyes, those who wear it are thugs, looters, rapists." Danny looked at me, then back at Larry. "Thompson never did any of that. He wasn't even born in the first world." How did he know that? He seemed to know everything about me, even my most private thoughts. My suspicions drifted back to the strange book he had read to verify me. True, I married before I became a citizen about 14 years ago. Before that, I didn't even know this place existed, and I didn't set foot here until about 5 years ago. Although the truck was rattling over the dirt road, we still felt the faint tremor of another earthquake. Larry took a deep breath and exhaled, his strange facial muscles relaxing. "I suppose, between us, we can call it neutral for now." Danny nodded, satisfied. "And you?" I asked. "One of your people inside the shield is unheard of. Why are you here?" He blinked his lashless eyelids a few times. I'd heard people say intacts couldn't cry, but that must be a malicious rumor. His eyes were very slightly watery for no apparent reason. His answer left me completely unsettled. It seemed no pillar in my life remained sacred. The intact homeworld had always been a mysterious place, brilliant, colorful. Crystal palaces hanging upside down in the sky. Their universe had entirely different laws of physics, only coincidentally intersecting with ours in a few interesting places. No planets, no stars, only light and clouds and floating gravitational rock formations. At least, that's what the rumors said. They were also the eternal adversaries of the First World. If even asterisk they were facing something so horrific, what hope did we have? Noah sat cross-legged in the corner of the truck bed, his eyes distant. I couldn't figure him out. He was a solitary person from everything I saw in his demeanor, but not solitary from a lack of friends. Wherever he stood, whoever he looked at, he seemed to be miles away. Sitting in the bouncing truck next to him, I felt closer to Larry, the sallow, hairless man, than to Noah. But he had gotten in the truck and chosen to accompany me into countless unknown dangers. I decided to trust him. The truck in front, carrying Jay and his men, swerved sharply and stopped in the middle of an empty field. Our truck braked behind it, and we all jumped out, wading through the tall stalks to a secret clearing. Inside, many of the command group were already present, and Thomas stood right in front. I looked around with a strange, protective anger. He absolutely couldn't follow us into danger. What else could he do? Awkwardly, he stepped forward. "Now I'm going to open a gate to the next agricultural world, then come back here. But it's below the vortex gate area she went through." "What? He's..." I watched in astonishment as he grimaced, raised his hands, and a wide oval opened in the clearing, connecting to another field. It looked almost like our field, but slightly different. Stepping forward, I also raised my hands instinctively. "My God, you're an intact." Danny stepped out, blocking me. "You know them." I couldn't hide my expression. They're also being tried alongside General Shaw. They're blaming them for crushing fist appearing. Thomas suddenly clapped his hands over his mouth, and the gate flickered dangerously. Danny pressed his face close to mine, pointing angrily. "Are you sure they're like us?" Thomas asked from behind his covered hands, tears welling behind his glasses. "Alex said he saw them but didn't know where they went. They're also in Tescoy," I told all the staring faces. Murmurs erupted around the room. "New objective," Danny announced. He looked around, then at me. "I'm sure the person you intend to rescue knows about the intact. While we're there, try to save Thomas's people too." I nodded. Rescuing a woman holding key information about crushing fist and also rescuing this boy's people. And another objective crystallized coldly in my heart. Thomas lowered his hands, his eyes becoming resolute and hopeful behind his glasses. The gate stopped vibrating, then widened by another 5 meters. He stepped through first. Noah followed, leading Jay and his men behind him. Danny held me back, stuffing my duffel bag into my hands. He spoke softly, just loud enough for others not to hear. "You have a special book in your bag. It will force some people to tell the truth. You said you just follow orders and don't need to know anything else, right?" I nodded, strangely proud of him. He gritted his teeth, a flicker of murderous intent in his eyes. I need you to use that book on the general you told me about last night. I need to know the truth about how it all started. Aware that many eyes were on me, I kept my expression calm. What if he's guilty? Our parents, he whispered, his entire body shaking with suppressed rage. All of our parents, they just never came home. That's why we're here and we have nowhere else to go. He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with tears and containing a fury I had only seen once before in my life. I nodded again. His order perfectly aligned with the cold hatred already settled in my heart. But more than that, somewhere within me, there were still empty spaces for a father's instinct, and with it, actions that transcended all personal matters. Thomas now occupied a place in those spaces, and this young man held another. In Tescoy, there were people who deserved justice, and if that required doing unspeakable things, then I was a soldier. I understand, sir. He gripped my forearm, I gripped back. Then I left, my face returning to its usual coldness. As I stepped through the ethereal blue gate, I saw Noah look up from his position outside the soldiers on the other side. There was no way he could know the icy storm within me, but I still turned my face away. Thomas squeezed his hand, and the gate closed. Then he spoke, his voice still firm. The station. He closed his eyes, concentrating, and another gate flickered open in the middle of the rice field, an oval void tearing through space. This time, on the other side was a dark concrete corridor, inside which a few red indicator lights flashed in a steady rhythm. This was a true vortex gate station, or at least a first-world military facility. I still didn't entirely trust the mysterious blue gates created by a child instead of that massive mechanical vortex. But the first gate had worked. I stepped through, leading Noah and Larry. I looked at the colored lines on the wall. Green was the fastest route. We walked on just as the radio on my hip crackled. The warm male voice from before spoke again. All right, I'm logged into the network there. Whenever you guys are ready, I'll activate the machine. It's still targeted to where she went. Navigating the underground corridors, we finally emerged into a huge tunnel containing many abandoned train tracks. Jumping down, we walked along them. Soon, we reached the dome. Near the entrance, on the wall, someone had spray-painted 2 words in faint brown paint. Why bother? I suddenly thought of the extreme despondency I had seen so much of in the First World. A hot hand gripped me tightly as I thought about the 600 billion people marching into this depression, through fracturing realities that were slowly collapsing. Our own military, our organization, had always been the force stationed at the outer layer of the shield, protecting humanity's sphere of influence. So where were they? The facility where I was deployed yesterday had only a few scattered, careless soldiers. We had simply let go. In the First World, we had known about crushing fist for years, but the people out here had to discover it for themselves. Did we see death approaching and decide to retreat into the inner golden shield, leaving everyone else to fend for themselves? For anyone high up, it must have been a very simple decision. The First World couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to, house and feed 90% of its existing population, let alone another nearly 1 trillion people. It was clearly written on the wall. If we can't stop crushing fist and can't save anyone, then why bother? I couldn't imagine the depth of that monstrous decision. Looking over, I saw Noah watching me from a distance. Although I hadn't expressed my cold fury, my righteous anger was bubbling up. Too many people needed to be held accountable. I started to feel like an exposed nerve or a predator preparing to kill. Silently leading the way around the white and purple lit dome to the gangway, I pulled a loose acceleration chair. We need to take this across there, bolt it down. They nodded, and it only took a few minutes. We sat in silence, waiting for Heath to activate the machine. I only spoke when the nauseating rotational movement began. This part is always the worst. Noah and Larry just grimaced, struggling against the uncomfortable force. The purple and white light flared into a tunnel around us. As the platform descended, the rotational force became so strong it almost made me pass out. Then we were thrown forward, instinctively staggering to our feet. At first, I thought I had returned to the same place where I had been deployed yesterday, but this place was larger, more crowded. If the place I came out of yesterday was sparsely populated, here there were actual guards. I knew immediately because they surrounded us with guns. Angry shouts erupted before I could regain my bearings. To his credit, Noah adjusted his vest, gave a dismissive smile at the muzzles pressed against his face, then gently pushed them aside. He played his role perfectly, but Larry played his even better. He was the one the soldiers were afraid of, and I quickly raised his yellow hands to reveal the handcuffs I had put on him before we left. "Tescoy," I shouted, escorting this high-value prisoner to Tescoy. It took a few minutes of bewildered stares and explanations before I got the 6 soldiers to lower their weapons. Their initial hostility dissipated. They let us walk freely across the large courtyard. It was then that I had a chance to really look at where I was. We were right next to the palace core of the city I had just left. Giant skyscrapers loomed overhead, surrounding us on 3 sides. On the 4th side, yellow clouds raced past at terrifying speed. The wind howled directly into our faces, and it was unusually hot that day and strangely quiet. "Is your world broken, Larry?" Noah asked, his lashless eyes filled with concern. I shook my head as we struggled through a particularly violent gust of hot wind. "This isn't right." Noah said nothing, but seemed to be scanning and taking in every detail. His face was still the cold mask of the wealthy, but I knew he was as worried as I was. "According to the map, which way is the gate?" "That way." I walked, trying to appear as if I had been this way many times. We entered a building, continuing our approach towards a half-open vault-like door. A guard sat at a table, reading a book. I frowned. The soldier's reaction to our sudden appearance had ignited a small spark of hope in me. The military was still doing its job in critical areas. But right here, before my eyes, was the clear return of the apathy that was becoming a cancer in this once great organization. "All right, go on," he said without looking up. I led Larry through. Noah glided behind, lighting a cigar as he walked. Behind the vault door was a much smaller vertical vortex machine designed for people to pass through. I pressed the only button on the wall, and we waited as the machine started. Just a few minutes later, a spinning purple circle appeared, revealing gray corridors on the other side. We all stepped through, the machine behind us slowly stopped, and the gate vanished. A blank wall blocked the way behind us, part of a one-way security protocol. The corridor ahead led to a waiting room, a reception area, where a bald man in a military uniform was asleep at the desk. Noah glanced at me, and I grimaced. All the complicated plans and convoluted lies to infiltrate the prison had been useless. In a way, that was even worse, because it meant the only multi-reality organization capable of doing something about crushing Fist had become a pathetic shadow of its former self. I silently committed this to memory for after the mission. The high-tech systems and massive machines that had built all of this and were still operating the worlds were still somewhere. If needed, we could steal access and do it ourselves. And who was keeping the outer shield fragments from shattering? That was the only thing keeping us all alive, and it required constant monitoring, daily intervention. Was there anyone on the fringes of existence still fighting, even though command had completely abandoned them? Walking past the sleeping guard and the empty guard posts, we came before a gleaming metal rectangle. It looked like a door, but there was no visible way to open it. Noah stepped forward. I had hoped to at least see a guard open it in front of me once. "How do you open it?" I asked, remembering why he was with us. "There are sensors on the other side," he explained, based on the data Heath sent. "They track brainwaves. They're linked to specific memories of each guard. For example, that sleeping guard there might just need to think about how he felt when his childhood dog died. That very personal emotional composite can't be copied or communicated with just a few words. It's the key for each guard. So that's what Danny meant by uncrackable, because the sensors are on the other side. You can't steal the key, and you can't open it even if you know the memory." I frowned. "So how do you plan to open it?" His eyes seemed to be thousands of miles away. "Emotions are around us all the time. They are the foundation of existence. Give me a moment to feel this place." "I'm not sure I can do something like this, but it's possible." Larry coughed softly, then stepped up to the smooth metal panel. "Excuse me, but this door is actually a little ajar already," he said. He was right. I uncuffed him, and all 3 of us pulled the door fully open. Each of us was gnawed by the feeling of how strange and hopeless everything was. The first area inside was a helijet landing pad. Through several windows, we saw transport ships ready for departure. Outside, it was ash clouds, thunder, and wind, occasionally torn by lightning. Noah's face was grim. "If they had no reason to keep you up here, they would just push you out. They'd give you a parachute and invite you to jump." I found a small window set directly into the wall. As Danny had said, we were several thousand feet up, and all I saw through the thick glass were ash clouds, lightning flashes, and a pockmarked surface below, eaten away by lava. I couldn't imagine anyone surviving down there. but the presence of the helijets indicated that occasionally people still had to be brought up for some rare purpose. The next section contained the actual cells, and this was where I needed some time alone for my own objective. "Let's split up," I suggested. "Wise?" Noah asked. Larry also waited for my answer. "The door's open, the guard's asleep. I don't think we'll be in any danger here," I said, using my own feelings to concoct a plausible reason. "These guys have simply given up." They looked at each other, nodding anxiously, then each chose a different corridor. I walked quickly, calculating how much time I had for a cold act of violence. I knew General Shaw was here somewhere, the intact were here, and our rescue target was here too. That many people, and I figured Noah and Larry would be busy with at least some of them. His cell was at the end of a long, empty corridor. He sat against the far wall, knees drawn up, in the exact posture Thomas had been in this morning. I found the cell door control panel at the end of the corridor, unlocked his cell, then quickly and silently returned. I stepped inside. A gaunt, heavily bearded young man looked up, surprised. He must have been about 24 now. When I last saw him, he was 18 or 19. "Blaku," I said softly, my face surely conveying everything. His jaw dropped slightly. "Thompson?" I remained standing, motionless. "Higgins said you were thrown in here." He nodded slowly. "They caught me trying to get here, hoping to find refuge from the disaster happening out there." "Stand up." Trembling, he braced his hands against the cold gray wall, slowly rising, as if seeking some security. I thought he understood he was likely to die, but I had to be sure. Setting my duffel bag down, I pulled out Danny's book, the one used to extract the truth from General Shaw. I would still use it on him if I had the chance, but nothing in the universe would stop me from doing this first. "Stand still, don't move." "How do I use it?" "Just open it and start." Indeed, it had chosen the exact subject I wanted to know about. "I'm bleeding somewhere, that's all I know. A warm stream running down from a numb head. Darkness everywhere, and I ran, the ink parting, and I buried my face in the hot sand. I've never felt that burning sensation so good." Looking up, I saw people aiming guns at me. Something had attacked us in the ink, something massive, fleshy, terribly strong. It threw hundreds of men with a single blow. The wounded were streaming out from along the wall of darkness, and General Shaw ordered them all arrested. "Treat everyone as a suspicious subject." They threw me into a tent with about a dozen others, guarded by soldiers, and it was a long time before a doctor came to clear me. Even before the doctor, Christina came by. Christina, your ex-wife and the head of the civilian advisory group, the scientists and technicians who always accompanied us on missions whose reasons were always beyond my comprehension. She was tough, but she seemed genuinely concerned about us. She asked each of us what we had seen, what we had heard, then pieced it together into a model of a giant, mirrored-skinned creature. I know it sounds crazy, but all the stories matched up. A few hours later, all the lieutenants were given a stack of new documents. It was a plan, a method to attack that mirrored monster, a plausible way to kill it. By then, I had been sent back to my unit. The whispers had already begun. Why didn't we just pull out? How crazy was this situation? Bring us back and bomb those places. Except, as someone analyzed, all forms of radiation and energy died after 3 meters. Every attack in the ink had to be carried out on foot, step by step. It made a sick kind of sense because we didn't know what we were there for or what we were fighting for. A few guys from other units banded together, demanding an answer. General Shaw immediately threw them into a detention camp, accusing them of mutiny. And the doctors kept doing what? Brain scans. The paranoia reached its peak. It felt like they had no idea what they were up against, as if anything could happen, and that thought terrified all of us. The ink looked exactly like a supernatural phenomenon, and supernatural meant all our skills and training were meaningless, yet we were still ordered to go back. I was still lightly wounded, so I was kept out that day. I had to sit and listen as the slow, step-by-step advance began again. Mortars fired, a few jets even circled overhead. It was eerie, the way no sound echoed back from that black valley. In the orange twilight, I sat on a high dune, watching the entire convoy of chained vehicles emerge from the ink. At the head of the chain was something like an impossibly large octopus, its fleshy body glowing orange. Its surface was mirrored, just as Thompson had predicted, and I could see the sunset spreading and fading on it like a dead reflecting pool. But for what purpose? That's what we debated endlessly in the infirmary tent. What good was a mirrored surface for such a colossal creature in absolute darkness? The only suggestion that silenced everyone, maybe it didn't live in the ink, Maybe it wandered in just like us from somewhere else. The carcass lay there like a mirrored mountain right next to the camp. It didn't rot, didn't smell, didn't decompose. It just lay there on the sand, a new landmark. Over time, I started to think that we had slaughtered an innocent creature simply because it tried to defend itself. Each day brought a new horror. The deeper we went into the ink, the more nightmarish things we encountered. Each new threat meant an immediate retreat, more casualties, and then new plans from the civilian advisory group. Every morning was a calculated and cruel execution of whatever we had encountered the day before. Some things deserved that death more than others. I was huddled on the cold sand, curled up in a bubble of light with another guy, when the first nerve mosquito flew past. By then, we were 3 miles deep in the ink, and something had been dogging the front lines for days, leaving the limbs of the dead near where they had once known people, so everyone's nerves were stretched to their breaking point. As soon as it entered my vision, I shot it. It looked like a mosquito with a wingspan of almost a meter, and it fell to the ground in a slimy puddle. Thousands of tiny versions of that very creature swarmed out of its corpse, immediately attacking the soldier with me. As I ran headfirst, I yelled into the radio, telling the guys in the light bubble behind me what I had just seen. And we watched in horror as my friend from moments ago stepped into the bubble, a serene smile on his face. He walked towards us, acting completely normal, but ignoring all the shouts to stop. I didn't blame those around me for opening fire on their own comrade. He fell to the sand, blood splattering, and hundreds of tiny insects crawled out of his ears and nose. We ran, broadcasting warnings over the radio, and the entire line contracted in a full retreat. Light bubbles flickered on and off around me as I dashed through the sand. Screams and gunshots erupted in intermittent bursts. Each time the light flared and died, I crawled out of the ink with my last ounce of strength, then collapsed onto the sand again. Now, the general's earlier precautions seemed to make sense. But that meant that while we were pushed in almost completely blind to the objective and the threat, he had known all along what we were facing. The survivors who left the ink were all rounded up and thrown into quarantine. But this time, we were furious. The shouts from a nearby tent were incessant. The noise seemed about to turn into a real mutiny, and who could not side with them? Countless people had fallen. General Shaw had repeatedly asserted that what we were doing was of the utmost importance. But he wouldn't say why. Do you understand that feeling? That feeling when the organization that once protected you and cared for you in exchange for loyalty suddenly turns into something else. Something that uses you and then discards you. We hadn't reached the point of risking our lives by firing back. Not yet, but the anger was almost at a boiling point. The next morning, everyone was given earplugs, gas masks, and new flamethrowers that had just been dropped. The nerve mosquitoes stood no chance, and each soldier became a mobile torch as we burned our way deeper into the ink. It was then that we realized we were going down an increasingly steep sandy slope and had exceeded the depth where the ink was wide. Tense jokes started passing through the radio, like we were digging our way straight to hell. And honestly, I wasn't sure that wasn't the truth, but what lay beneath was important on a grander scale. General Shaw had promised us that, and we could feel it each time we got closer. Something had fallen to earth here, something unimaginably horrifying, and we had all seen the daily price of not dealing with it. But that didn't stop the seed of hatred in us from growing. Anger, each time a new threat attacked in an unexpected way. We started hearing dead comrades calling over the radio. Anyone who followed that voice would join the chorus and never be seen alive again. We started having hallucinations of ourselves as children, sitting in a massive church listening to sermons about God's grace, but it was a God you didn't want to know. The problem was, in those hallucinations, you believed. You truly believed that God existed without a shadow of a doubt, and he hated you and all life. The earplugs initially given to deal with the nerve mosquitoes helped, but those blasphemous sermons pierced directly into our brains. 9% of any group sent into the ink, 9% would turn into fanatical converts and attack their comrades. We started moving in squads of 11 or fewer. Whatever the effect was, it didn't round up like that. If a 12th person so much as lingered nearby, almost immediately one of us would go mad. I spent many nights in my hammock, weeping. My body convulsed from the random horror of it all. How did I survive so long? We had lost 40% of our original strength, and it all felt like a cruel lottery. I used to be a joker. I used to laugh. People used to call me a prankster for some of the stupid stunts I pulled. But I didn't laugh anymore. I had seen too many arms and legs brought in as gruesome trophies. heard too many blasphemous sermons, pulled the trigger on too many comrades who had been converted or had their brains eaten, or I think many of us hit a wall at the same time. One morning, I dragged myself out of my hammock. The tent held only me, and I realized I was the only one in my squad left alive. No one came to wake me because the officers weren't even sure I still existed. Standing in the sand like a zombie, I looked around and saw the same expression on everyone's faces. "Go," an officer yelled. "Move." I wasn't even sure who said that first. We just stood there. "No, no," the officer roared, stepping forward, his face red with anger. No one answered. He spat his fury at us, but no one had the strength to listen. Finally, the problem was escalated, and the entire camp became paralyzed as the refusal born of mental exhaustion spread. General Shaw himself emerged from his tent, walking among us, his face gray beneath his thick beard. He looked each man directly in the eye, scrutinizing them. Finally, he spoke to a particular man. "Do you have any questions?" The man trembled but still spoke for all of us. "Sir, I've been held at gunpoint, thrown in detention, had my brain scanned repeatedly, thrown into supernatural darkness, watched my comrades ripped apart then brought back to me. I've had to listen to one demonic sermon after another, even had to shoot a friend because a mosquito crawled into his brain. I'm tired, and I know if I go back into the ink, I'll die." General Shaw nodded, his gaze sweeping over the weary faces around him. "You all feel this way." Nods followed one another. He took a step back, and his already deep voice dropped another tone, thickening with anger. "If we don't handle this situation, we will all die, which means it's very likely that whether you go back into the ink or not, you will still die." A murmur of discontent spread through the crowd. As he turned away, his order sliced through our remaining hope. "Set up the hot boxes and cycle each man through until they comply. 2 hours each." A wave of resentful sounds rose. But we were soldiers, and at least for now, we didn't have to go back into the ink, so we still followed orders. Officers began constructing their own torture devices under the scorching sun. I was drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted when they threw me into the box I had built with my own hands. It was actually very simple. 6 metal panels bolted together. It didn't take long to build. But my 2 hours would feel like a lifetime. I sat there sweating profusely, my skin feeling fried, my entire body melting. A lifetime. All I wanted was to go home. Everything was literally a nightmare. On one side was the darkness and its hellish threats, tearing us apart, tearing at our sanity. On the other was a slow death in a hot box. General Shaw didn't intend to let us leave. Suddenly, amidst the feverish delirium, a thought flashed through my mind. No one had ever scanned General Shaw's brain. How did we know he wasn't being manipulated by something? If a nerve mosquito had gotten inside him, this was how it would slowly kill us all. I cried, but no tears fell. I was too dehydrated. I remember very clearly the certainty that I would die in that box before I had a chance to grasp that faint ray of hope. But the lid of the box finally popped open. They pulled me out and shoved the next guy in. I stumbled to the nearest water, tipping my head back to drink greedily. Beside me, a long line of soldiers, red as cooked shrimp, were doing the same. As soon as I could, I slipped away to find Christina. She was in the technical tent, drawing diagrams to kill Prater. Her face was full of hatred for the creature. And I didn't blame her, but she quickly adopted a neutral expression when she saw me. I almost had to force the words out through my heat exhaustion. "I have a theory that General Shaw has been compromised." She looked at me, her gaze half skeptical, half listening. "Oh," I nodded, trying to breathe normally. "This is insane, unlike any operation I've ever been on. He's pushing us forward with torture, and he doesn't care if we die. Do you have any recent brain scans of him, like you did of us?" Her gaze drifted for a moment. "No, actually I don't." "Will you do one?" I asked desperately. She nodded. "You think of the nerve mosquitoes?" "Yes, I'll take care of it," she promised softly. "Now, get out of here before anyone sees you. No one must know about this conversation." I dragged myself back to my hammock and collapsed before my body officially gave out. And they came back to drag me away a few minutes later, pulling me back to the hot box for another turn. Many people in those boxes in the sand, under the heat, were crying. We couldn't take it. Simply couldn't. The moans and shouts gradually gave way to our collective agreement to return to the ink the next day to be spared from the hot box. I lay in my tent, awake all night, with only the faint hope that Christina would do something before we had to go back to that dark hell. The silence. She crept in near dawn, holding brain scan results. "What do you have?" I asked, overjoyed, trying to sit up. She shook her head, holding out the paper. "His brain is normal." "What?" Nothing abnormal in his brain, no mosquitoes. Whatever is in the ink, it must be worth all this pain. I remember bursting into uncontrollable tears. No, I'm sorry, she said, pouring a little water on my burning red forehead. But we're all here for a reason. Technically, everything he's doing is legal. She paused for a moment. But if things get worse, find me, I'll make some calls. I could only grimace and nod. And then, a few hours later, it was time to get dressed and go again. No more jokes, no more whispers. Not a sound of conversation, just shattered, desperate silence. We repeated the required motions, setting up lights, guarding against unnamed things. But I was sure each of us was simply waiting to die in a new and terrible way. That very day, we finally reached our objective. I remember we were about 6 miles deep in the ink and another 4 miles straight down, thanks to the impossible slope. I imagined it like a giant, invisible impact crater that only existed in that dark valley. And it lay there in the middle of the massive crater, its slopes extending up and away in all directions. Has contact been made with Prater? General Shaw asked over the static-filled radio clusters. No one answered yes. No one answered because I knew where Prater had gone. It constantly retreated whenever we tried to attack it, and it had consumed more than one of our comrades' bodies to replenish itself. Standing with 5 others, staring at the source of the ink, I knew where it hid every night. A 3-meter-high sphere sat squarely on the sand, as if it had simply fallen and rested there. Its surface was near-perfect darkness, but inside we saw another place. We watched it shift scenes one place, then another. A few seconds later, another place. This was some kind of hell egg or black hole or shadow gate or whatever, and it led to places beyond our worst nightmares. We reported its discovery, and the next order surprised no one. All units converge at the sphere. We will attack each time the world of blood lakes and metal mountains appears. This time, I knew who spoke. It was me. I lifted the radio, signing my own death warrant. No, sir. Do it. Another man lifted his radio, eyes wide, witnessing what by all standards looked like hell. His voice choked with tears. No, sir, we refuse. Prater must die. General Shaw roared over the radio, his scream so high-pitched it made the entire system crackle. 40 soldiers stood around the sphere, illuminated by a very faint, glossy light, ignoring the 3-meter limit. And we looked at each other, confused. Prater. That was the real objective of the operation. Just based on the anger and hatred in that scream, was this a personal revenge mission, or had he gone completely mad? Plant the explosives, I remember whispering, and somehow everyone heard. I had no authority to command, but they listened. We gathered all the C4 and anything else we had. We removed all the mortar shells and packed them in. We surrounded that damn thing with enough firepower to blast a hole in reality. It seemed consistent with what I suspected it was. We fought our way back through the ink, no longer afraid. Everything that had been in there had been coldly, systematically killed by thousands of armed soldiers. And now, only we remained. We never knew exactly what had left our friends' limbs for us, but we guessed if they were going to attack, they probably wouldn't now. Long lines of soldiers emerged from the ink, dragging themselves back to camp, bodies and souls exhausted. General Shaw stood there waiting for us, all the officers lined up on his left and right. His statuesque figure, his cold, stony expression, immediately told us we're in big trouble. Someone recounted what we had done and how we had set the timer for the explosives. He took a breath, somehow looking even taller. Go back into the ink, disarm all explosives. No time left, someone said. General Shaw ordered without moving his head, shoot him in the leg. The officer to his left raised his weapon. The gunshot made all of us exhausted soldiers jump. General Shaw spoke again, go back into the ink, disarm all explosives. You don't understand what's at stake here. Because you won't tell us, sir, a woman to my right shouted. You brought us out here to be cannon fodder for a personal vendetta? He shot that woman. Another gunshot, and she fell to the sand, blood pooling. I will not hesitate, General Shaw continued, his eyes blazing. Go back into the ink, disarm the explosives. None of us dared to open our mouths after that. Slowly, our will crumbled, and under the guns of the officers at our heels, we went back into the ink, found the sphere, and disarmed all the fireworks. Many wept uncontrollably as they worked. Others tried not to look at the nightmarish worlds inside that profane sphere. He didn't even let us set up an ambush. He wanted Prater to return, thinking it was now safe to stalk us again. If the sphere was still surrounded by explosives, it would never show its face. I lay in my tent that night, turning countless options over in my mind. I couldn't escape on foot. The desert was teeming with rebels. If they saw me, they'd shoot me dead on sight. And why wouldn't they? We had taken their way of life and all their economic resources. That's what we had always done out here, more or less, at least until this nightmare began. There was nowhere to go, no escape. I remember staring at the empty cots in the tent, almost saying aloud, "General Shaw must die." I felt like a ghost. I crawled out of my hammock, slipped through the tents, whispering words that would surely lead to someone's death. If they found out it was us, if not, it would be him. Perhaps I had lost my mind by then. I had been struck by a giant mirrored tentacle, endured weeks of psychological torture, imprisoned in a hot box like physical torture, and cornered like an animal in every conceivable way. At that point, I didn't care if I survived or not. General Shaw had to die. She was going around asking for more details about the sphere when she overheard what I was discussing. I truly liked her. She was a good person, but all of us would die if General Shaw found out. She was surely on her way to tell him. I lunged at her from behind, knife in hand, trying to stay silent, but somehow she heard and spun around, avoiding the first strike. She fought fiercely, and I was caught off guard. She knocked the knife from my hand, and I barely managed to